Okay. I will never get used to her. So we've got two more of our Sangha going to be talking about their going for refuge and how it expresses in their life. And the first person we're going to hear from is Aryabhachin. I've known Aryabhachin for many years. He was around when I first came. And I just remember.
Padmasaki is Dr. Bandhu.
Oh, it's because you know what? It's because you've got the wrong name. I'm sorry, Arthur Bandhu. Yes. Well, you knew who I was talking about. It's Arthur Bandhu. And I've known him for many years. When I first came to the Nottingham Centre, he was there, and over the years, I was really impressed with his gentle steadiness whenever I was with him, and his deeply generous spirit. You know, he would just respond to whatever was needed, and he was very much part of the centre just running and functioning, because he just seemed to do everything. I think I remember Kumesiri saying, well, Arthur Bandhu does everything. What are we going to do when he leaves? And he did leave Nottingham, and we survived, but it was a struggle, Arthur Bandhu. I've got to say, it was a struggle. You left a big gap. So it's really lovely that you are back in Nottingham and that you're here tonight to talk to us on this very, very special and personal topic of your going for refuge. And your experience in the movement is very varied now, and it will be lovely to hear what you have to say. So I'll pass on to you.
Well, thank you, Padmasaki. Very nice what you said. Thank you. So I've gone through a bit of a transition from when I was in Nottingham. So it might be something like 3 years ago that I left. Obviously, I've come back because I'm here. But I first came along to the centre when I think I might have been 19 or 20, and got stuck in, got fully involved, moved into the community pretty quickly, and ended up living in the community for 20 years. So upstairs in the men's community. It's nice to be here. I've been having dinner with them upstairs, so sort of remembering a lot of times gone by. And for 20 years, I had a really good, rich time, sort of just immersing myself in what happens at a tree rattle centre and the community as well. And I learned a huge amount and really sort of grew up in tree rattle, sort of really developed in lots of different ways. And yeah, I feel I've got a kind of richness to my life and a stability to my life that I can owe to these conditions and living with people and working with everyone I was working with at the centre and being part of the Sangha. But the interesting thing was, and I'm kind of going to talk about it a little bit here, but mainly I want to talk about what I'm doing now and how I got there. After 20 years, maybe it's not that much of a surprise, I decided I wanted to do something different. But I had no idea what the different thing was, it was just different. And it's sort of like maybe perhaps it was a bit like I grew as much as I could grow here. And once I kind of reached a certain point, I got a bit kind of like I kind of hit kind of wall, and I just really longed to have a different experience of myself, and sort of see more of life and the world. And the quite strong part was that I wanted to feel my own kind of independence, and I'd loved working on it as a team and sort of being involved in a kind of a project with people, a great project that people we were all working towards together. But I'd never really sort of, so I was 19, I just left university and I got immersed in this thing. And then I wanted to kind of listen to some other parts of myself. I think that's sort of one way of looking at it. So I kind of had to leave. It didn't get too it didn't get too much of a crisis point, because everyone was happy, sort of supportive of me leaving and doing what I needed to do, and I sort of recognised what was going on soon enough, sort of with the help of others around me.
Tabandhu, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but the sound isn't very good for us. I don't think your lapel mic is working.
Shall I go to the other mic? Turn the camera.
Just try the
Can you hear me now?
No.
What we doing? Did you hear? Did you catch the gist of what I started saying, or shall I start again? Anyone there? What's going on?
I'm waiting to hear what others think. I mean, we sort of could hear you, but I'm not sure whether others heard you well enough or not. So
I could get the gist of it. I think.
Yeah, I think we got the gist of it.
Just carry on.
So I worked at the centre a long time. I got fed up. I left, but it was really good, and then I left. So that's the first bit. And in a way, yeah. So I needed to. There were other aspects of me that this is just my theories of what was going on. Other aspects of me that were sort of calling out for attention after being part of a team and working here at the centre. And eventually they sort of came to the front in a way. And I think they were partly, there's a bit of a hermit in me. I always fantasized about living in a hut and having space and quiet. And particularly to do sort of creative stuff like some artwork and writing and exploring my kind of inner world and imagination. And I think that was really sort of calling out for me to give it some attention. And after I left Brighton, I haven't mentioned that yet. After I left Nottingham, I went to Brighton and had a kind of little bit of a spell of exploring that independence and space. But then I got kind of itchy feet and I sort of missed the community that I'd had. So I sort of dipped into a few other Buddhist projects. But probably I hadn't really answered that call of doing the creative stuff and living independently. So it soon became clear these other projects I got involved with weren't going to be the thing that I settled on. And I started to think, I really need to answer this call and start to explore how I might do it. I'll cut to the end of that story and say, I'm living in a yurt at the bottom of Jotada's garden. That's the best solution I could come up with. And it's pretty good. It's so Jotada and Carolyn, I live in there with them in this nice yurt that they've got, and they let me in the house, and I'm allowed to use the kitchen and things like that. So yeah, no, it's lovely, lovely living with them, and yeah, they're very friendly and open to me. So that I sort of found a really nice kind of setup to do what I want to do, and they're really respectful and quite appreciative of what I'm sort of trying to do with my time. And I work part-time in a care home nearby, just 2 days a week, which is brilliant. And the rest of the time, I just sort of sit in this yurt and try and be creative, which is the hardest bit. So I'm sort of going to write a little, well, tell you a little bit about that. So while I worked at the centre, I sort of think actually that isn't totally separate from this life now. And I think probably so much of what I did here and the chance to meditate and teach meditation and work with others, running courses and classes at the centre, in a way really kicked off this sort of inner life, and sort of, yeah, people were very supportive of me, what I was doing with around sort of dreams and meditation and artwork, and I was even given a lot of freedom to kind of share that in the way I taught here at the centre, or the way we did rituals, and yeah, so it was really, I was able to do it. But at a certain point, it sort of got kind of all-consuming, and I wanted to give more of my attention to that and not take part in organizational meetings or send emails or anything like that. So it sort of took over, and now I'm kind of giving it my full attention. So yeah, so I was even before I left Nottingham, I was kind of having dreams about living on my own back in my student accommodation, and I was dreaming that I was making things out of cardboard and like just sort of this world, building this kind of weird world in this student house. And so I suppose I feel like I'm sort of answering that call. I saw this film recently, and it's called Dave Made a Maze, and it's the story of this guy who, his girlfriend goes away one weekend. He's an artist, and his girlfriend goes away, and he builds a maze in the living room. And it's so kind of incredible that when she gets back from this weekend away, he's lost inside this maze that's made out of cardboard. And it's a terrible film. But I thought when I read the description it was going to be brilliant and exactly sort of my thing, but it wasn't great. But it somehow sort of captures what creativity and the sort of thing in a certain kind of way I get up to. So it's a bit like I like to kind of create magical worlds and sort of explore the images and the worlds in my dreams and sometimes in meditation. Yeah, so this is what I'm kind of giving my time to. But it's a challenge in some ways. So in a certain way, it's very easy. Like there's no outside pressures or anything like that. It's a simple life. But what I've written here is just a few sort of conversations I have with a kind of Mara as I'm doing these trying to follow this calling that I've got at the moment. And here's a couple of the dialogues that we have. So sometimes he says to me, "What right do you have not to have a proper job and just sit around musing pretentiously?" That's one of the things he sometimes says to me. "You're wasting your time." And occasionally he sometimes notices that I've been watching Netflix for rather too long, and he says, "See, you're not an artist or a writer, you're just lazy. You're not helping anyone, you're just avoiding real work." So that's another thing he says. And then sometimes he says, "You realize you have no great skill as an artist," and the same goes for writing. But I kind of think I can handle that one and tell him that I'm not seeking to be a famous artist. I'm not sure if that would be a good thing or not, if it happened accidentally. And I say to him, people don't have to like my paintings at all, but if through making them, and the same goes for sort of writing things, I learn a bit more and see a bit more, then that makes it worthwhile to be doing it. And actually, I've found people do like them, and other Buddhists like them, and something of my practice is communicated through some of these things that I do. And then Mara says, this is a bit like what my grandmother said to me at one point, "But shouldn't you get a proper job and buy a house? What will happen when you're old? You'll be broke and you won't have a house." And I'm not sure what the answer to that one is. But when that one's put to me, I sort of realized, actually, you're going to have a hard time talking me out of this. I'm not going to get a proper job. I'm going to carry on doing this. And but there's some real kind of yeah, it's significant to me what I'm doing. So sometimes I have these doubts, but at the heart of it, I kind of know this is true for me, and this is sort of my area of practice somehow. Yeah, what was the last thing? I don't know how long I've been talking now because of the technical difficulties. Yeah, so it's been it's a new thing. So it was quite interesting, sort of thinking about what to say about this moving into this different phase, because in certain ways I'm not totally sure of myself in taking this step. and giving my time to it. But it's also, I've started to realize I can't kind of plan where I'll be in 10 years or 20 years or 1 year. And whenever I start doing that, it sort of seems to be driven by insecurity and kind of fear. And it's a sort of that voice of Mara saying, well, who are you? Look at yourself messing around. Everyone else is doing real things. And this is some sort of game or something like that. But I'm starting to tune into a certain kind of, like from experience, I kind of know which voice has kind of served me well. And when I kind of reflect about what following this sort of creative interest has done for me, that's when I can kind of get some confidence that actually I am on the right path. And this is one way that I practice the Dharma. I was thinking that one of the things I've read recently, and it's not to compare myself to Jung, but some of you might have heard of his Red Book, which is all about him kind of having these dialogues with sort of dream characters or characters and archetypes and figures that he meets when he kind of just sits and reflects. His active imagination is what he's doing, apparently. And in a way, I think that's kind of what a style of that is what I'm engaged in with my artwork and writing. And yeah, the one last thing I'll just finish with saying, one reflection that helps me kind of be confident to carry on doing this for the time being, at least, is a thought that if my younger self, or sort of 15 to 18-year-old self, were to kind of somehow wander down the garden path and meet me in the yurt, they'd be like, yes, this is great. I'm glad 43-year-old me is doing this and hasn't kind of put on a tie and gone to the office. And I just sort of got this image of him finding my sort of notebooks with all these kind of scribblings about the nature of consciousness and little dreams I've written on post-it notes, and somehow thinking of that makes me think, oh yeah, this is me sort of following something that's been present for me, and is the following of the Dharma in how I found I need to kind of do it in a way. So yeah, I'll leave it there. But yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arthur Bandhu. It's lovely to hear and imagine you in your yurt with all your creativity flowing. And it would be, you know, it's just a wonderful inspiration to hear how you followed that, despite the voices that maybe were cautioning you not to. So sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you.
So next we've got Kumesiri, who's she's my KM. She's a special friend to me, and she's been a really big support to me around the centre and to everybody here at the centre. I mean, she does such a lot. She does such a lot. I don't know how she does it. And yet she remains inspired and inspiring through all that. And it's just a delight to see her. And I can't wait to hear how she explores this topic of her going for refuge, although I think it will be very beautiful. So thank you, Kumesiri.
Oh, thank you, Padmasaki. I'm not sure how long I have. Are we planning to have groups still or not tonight? Because I thought Adabana might have talked a bit longer. So I'm just wondering.
Well, I think you need
I
to
thought 20, I was given 20 minutes, but then, yeah, okay.
say what you need to say. And if there's time for groups, we'll go into groups. And if there's not, we'll stay together and maybe just have some.
Yeah, we could have a, okay. Okay, everybody. So yeah, I've got this title, Kumesiri is Going for Refuge. and it's a bit of a life story, I think. But what came to mind as well is that actually at some point somewhere in the next few years, I'd love to give a series of talks on exploring certain areas of going for refuge in my life more deeply, in a general kind of way. But yeah, I'll give you a flavor of it now. Actually, when I think about spiritual practice, or what really stands out for me always from the three jewels most is the Sangha. I mean, the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha really, they go together. They can't be present without each other. Yeah. But the Sangha building is my heartbeat, I would say, is most inspiring to me. And there can only be Sangha, just thinking about Sangha, there can only be Sangha when there are common values, when there's the guiding principles of the precepts, and there is, all going for insight, really. When people are really practicing as a community together, as a Sangha, there is inspiration, there's encouragement, and there is transformation. There really is. There's this quote from Sangharakshita, from Bhante Sangharakshita, that the spiritual community, or Sangha, is a voluntary association of free individuals who have come together on account of a common commitment to a common ideal. So that's a commitment to the three jewels. So commitment to practice, really. But it's a voluntary association of free individuals. Often say it's a bunch of individuals trying to get on together in a way. That's a more, what is it? More plump way of saying it, maybe. Yeah. But we're choosing to interact with each other. And then the other thing that comes to mind that seems to be really important in the way I want to practice is intensity. It's the word intensity. I seem to keep looking for situations that bring intensity to my practice, or to practice. And intensity in a context of spiritual practice, that really means intensity in terms of transforming oneself, going beyond the limitations of the idea of ourselves as a fixed entity, and going beyond those limitations that we all have. So intensity should mean drama for the ego, otherwise it's not intense. It's not. There has to be drama, there has to be challenge, really, and fun. So here I am as a 24-year-old in Holland, looking for a spiritual path, really. I was looking for meaning in my life, and I went to a retreat, a weekend retreat run by Triratna, then Eftulbio, with a lot of other people in their 20s. 25 of us, all of us in our 20s, really. There was one person who was 40 and he was ancient. So it was a very young Sangha in those days. This was in November 79, so a long time ago. And I was finding Buddhism, really, on that retreat. I just fell in love with the Buddha. I fell in love with meditation, and I fell in love with the order members there. There were 3 order members from England coming over to run this retreat for us in Holland. And there wasn't anything else, Triratna wasn't that big. It was big in England, but in Holland, that was all we had. 1 or 2 weekend retreats a year, that was it. I just loved it. At the time, I worked in Rotterdam, as my first job was in Rotterdam. So I was 24 years old, and almost every week on Monday nights, I'd travel to Utrecht, or a little village nearby Utrecht, De Bilt, where a community of squatters really were living, and some of those were they became really close friends of mine. They were living together, and some of them were involved in Triratna. and I got to know them through those retreats. And I became a mitra actually in the basement of that house squat. It's a beautiful house actually. Yeah, and that just traveled, yeah, as I said, Monday nights for 1.5 hours to get there, sometimes a bit longer, and 1.5 hours to get back. Yeah, this was by train and bus, and I was working. So yeah, it was, we were all young, inspired, idealistic, naive, and yeah, but really just inspired. So I just wanted to do that because this was where I met Sangha in a way. And all we did was basically eat and do a puja. That was it. So, but anyway, it was worth it. Some of those friendships I still have in my life. Yeah, so that was, yeah, really finding the Sangha, finding the three jewels. And then I decided to move to London to work near the LBC. We had a vegetarian restaurant there, the Cherry Orchard, it was called in those days. It was a women's business, and it was part of the London Buddhist Centre. It still is a restaurant now, but it's run not by the Sangha anymore. It's run by other people. It's still a good cafe, really. But yeah, I went to work there, and I went to live in a community with 8 of us in a house that was suitable for 5. Yeah, so we did this. There's 4 houses in a row near the London Buddhist Centre that are all women's communities these days. They're still there, and they started in '83 when I moved there. So I really wanted to live and work together with other Buddhists and find out actually what I wanted to do with Buddhism, whether I wanted to become an order member. I had become a mitra by then, but yeah. So here we were. It's incredibly intense living and working together in that way. And I actually shared a room with somebody I didn't really know beforehand. Got to know her well. Yes, so she's also in the order. I love her a lot. You know, we don't see a lot of each other now, but that's 1.5 years of just sharing a room. Not huge rooms, but yeah, we did. And 8 in a house of 5, you know, how do you do it, huh? And it's, so yeah, we didn't have money. We run this vegetarian restaurant, a lot of hard work, really, many hours, physically quite demanding work. And then also living with the same people. Not everybody who I worked with lived with me, but all of us who lived together also worked in the Cherry Orchard. And we were all involved in the London Buddhist Centre, supporting classes and events. It was a full-on life. And I was there for 7 years. But for me, it was almost the happiest time of my life, if I look back. It was full of inspiration. Yeah, and full of change. I think it felt like around the London Buddhist Centre, there were businesses like the Cherry Orchard, there were lots of communities. It was very alive. And it felt like there was like a Buddhist village in East London, yeah, Bethnal Green. It was a bit grubbier that time than it is now. Yeah. Yes, but yeah. And at the same time, it was like a Buddhist village, but it wasn't a bubble either, because working in a business, you get to know all the local businesses as well. There's very good connections with the local area. Yeah, so, but yeah, we didn't have money. We had to go to, I remember going with Mega, an order member I lived with, went to Brick Lane markets in a big hall where we found a carpet that could possibly cover the whole house. Yeah, so, and it didn't cost much. It was turquoisey green, I remember that well. And we also found secondhand, not so good gas heaters for every room. It's a bit dodgy, I think, but there we go. We just didn't have much money, but it didn't matter. It was really, yeah, it's actually working and living together like that. So bumping into each other's tendencies and patterns and views that if you want to keep going with that, you just have to. one has to change. Yeah. And I think I really felt I was just enveloped with the Dharma, with practice, and well, people practicing with me. So you could just talk. I'd come off a retreat, and I could talk about what had been happening on that retreat, what I was experiencing about meditation, Dharma things, other things, and while I was stirring the soup, or creating a salad. So it was that. Also working in a restaurant like that, a cafe, a lot of people from the Sangha around the London Buddhist Centre would come and have cups of tea or food. So there was a lot of interaction with the wider Sangha. And I loved that element. But also a lot of the local community just came into the business. We had one person, he used to work at the LBC when it was a fire station. He was a fireman from that time, because it was a Victorian fire station before. And he used to come with his dog, and we only knew the name of the dog, Winston. So we called him Mr. Winston. He never told us his real name, because he loved being called Mr. Winston. He come every day just for food. So, and a lot of businesses around, there's some schools and other businesses around that people would just come for lunch every day. So you just get to know, I suppose what I loved is that interaction with the wider community. So not just our Triratna Sangha. Yeah, very intense time. And there's also what I think when you're just living and working together with people in such a kind of lively Sangha, there is friendships form, but also with people that you might not at first think you would be friends with. It is something really about going in Sangha, going beyond likes and dislikes, beyond preferences. It's so important. And I found this quote from Sangharakshita, from Bhante Sangharakshita again, which I love actually. He says, if one wants to break down class and any other distinctions, one must do what the Buddha in effect said in connection with the caste system. So the caste system in India. So the Buddha said, you relate to other people just as individuals. In communication with them, you should not see them in terms of any group to which they may happen to belong. You should try to see the person in front of you and try to relate to the incipient individuality that is in them. If you do that on a wide scale, class and every other kind of group barrier will be broken down. So here's the Buddha and Sangharakshita just encouraging us to relate to anybody, everybody, not from our conditioning, not from our views of belonging or security or safety or what we used to, but just as another human being, another living being who we meet. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, we make friends for life, I think, in Sangha. I think that happens in our Sangha right now, do go out to each other, do meet, yeah. It is so valuable, it is so valuable. At the moment, actually, I live with a friend, Karunamaya lives with us. She's visiting Padmasakhi at the moment, but she's from the start of the pandemic, she's been living with me and Kshantika. And I knew her in London. That's where our friendship started. And she worked for years in India amongst the women in the Sangha in India. She's given for 24 years loads and loads of her life and work to that. And at the moment she lives with us. So, friendships, you might not be in touch with each other a lot, but it just comes back, because that's the thing in a Sangha, you can't get away from each other. And that's very good. You have to resolve things. And there's another saying from Bhante, or a quote from Bhante Sangharakshita, that I have reflected on a lot, which is, there is no private life in the order. There is no private life, in a Sangha, really. You just, you don't keep, you don't hide. basically. But to be able to share yourself, I suppose you just have to really get to know yourself more and more. And that's the other thing about being around other people. You just come up against your own limitations. So it's best, actually, isn't it, to be reflected back by other people. And it really helps to get to know yourself. I decided to say a little bit more. I decided to go back to Holland. That was in 1990, after 7 years in London. I was ordained then for 2 years. And I went back to Holland. The Sangha in Holland was still very, very small. There was, in a way, only Vajragita, one order member. And I decided to go back because I had to do a retraining for just under a year to stay an occupational therapist. That's what I trained as. And to keep my qualifications, I had to do a retraining. And I used that. That was my last chance. So I decided to go back to Holland to do that. And at the same time, to find out whether I wanted to then work and live in Holland to build Sangha, to help, Vajragita build the Sangha. In a way, it's like going back to help to create something that was missing when I was in Holland, and why I went to London in a way, because there wasn't Sangha much at all, actually, at the time when I came across Triratna and Buddhism, not in Holland. So the LBC was totally different because it was like a Buddhist village. I stopped doing my retraining as an OT. I actually, when I lived with Vajragita in Holland, I just decided what I wanted to do is help create a center, create a center in Amsterdam. So I stopped the training and did that. And it was really I don't want to be a missionary, for the Dharma, knock on people's door and say, here is Buddhism, go for it. It's more like creating the conditions for people to meet the Dharma or to meet the Three Jewels. That's what I wanted to do. But going back to Holland from such a Buddhist village as we had in London was such a culture shock. Here I was Dutch, but after 7 years being totally I felt like I lived in a Buddhist vihara almost, in a Buddhist monastery in the middle of London. But back in Holland, I started living with Vajragita, so there was two of us. Our flat actually was the center. So my bedroom was the reception room for the center and the bookshop. So I built a bed and lived above it. Well, that was my room. So it's very small in a way. But it was such a culture shock in terms of Sangha, because I was so used to being around people, Sangha people, all the time. And in Holland, like to just make an arrangement to meet somebody. I remember trying to meet somebody, a mitra who's now an order member there. And she said, oh yes, I think I have time in 3 weeks. And I was just used like, in London, it would be the next day or, in a few days or the same day. So that culture of meeting wasn't there. And I felt people really held on to what I called these private thresholds in their lives. Threshold to step over into somebody's private space. I wasn't used to that because I lived and worked with people, and I love that intensity of Sangha. It's changed a lot actually now, but somehow I really wanted to help build Sangha in Holland, and that's what I did actually, quite a lot of that. A little bit about going back to Holland from London. Sangharakshita was often staying in above the London Buddhist Center. There was a little flat where he would often stay, and I went sometimes would go and see him, meet him. And before going back to Holland, I went up to meet him and talk about that. And I talked about, going back to actually train and work as an occupational therapist again. And I just wanted to know what he thought of that. And he just said, actually, as long, he said, he would think, and then he'd say, that's what he would say, and then he'd say, very thoughtful, as long as it is not for security, as long as it is not for security. That was all. He didn't say, oh, you shouldn't do this or you should do that. Also, Sangha Rakshita ordained me. He gave me my name. So yeah, what he said often would go in. I'd reflect on it. That sentence, not for security. And I think that helped me to kind of decide to not finish that training and to go into the unknown and just set up an Amsterdam Buddhist center, yeah, without much financial support. Also at that time, there was a time when I was the only order member in Holland. Now, Holland is not a big country, but Buddhism wasn't that known in the 80s, yeah, in the 90s. I felt I was really standing alone, and I had to be able to stand alone. And I made this conscious decision. I remember it very clearly. I thought, okay, I'd rather go back to the LBC. It's wonderful, isn't it, with the support of a lot of Sangha there and friendships. I was missing it immensely. And I had this kind of crisis thinking, I want to go back. I want to go back. And then actually deciding there and then that I wouldn't, that I, even if I was staying on my own as an order member in Holland, that I would give it a go. So yeah, I became chair of the Amsterdam Buddhist Center, and we built it up. There were other order members arrived. But it was something that was really important there, that I would stand alone and do it. And I think just making conscious decisions like that, conscious choices, really, really, well, again, it created that intensity, yeah, of practice somehow. I'll explain it another time more. Yeah. And then after years of chairing the Buddhist Center in Amsterdam, I decided to work as a carer nurse in Amsterdam. I did that for many years. Again, I'll say more about it another time, I think. But I think in a way, what I was trying to say is I've made many choices of, actually then I worked as a carer nurse, and then after, it's like I had a bit of a pension, I had an income, a regular income. And then at some point, I realized that I didn't want to keep going like that. I wanted to actually choose to work within a Sangha context again. Yeah. It's like a going forth actually. And then coming to Nottingham, I was in a relationship with Chantika. That's why I came to Nottingham. I knew the center, I knew some people there, but not many. But what I decided to do is basically, I didn't have an income for some years. Chantika supported me. We could live cheaply. But I also went to Spain to be on the team for the women's ordination retreats, which were 3 months long. Every year there was a 3-month retreat. And I did that for 4 years when I came to Nottingham. And I did some work in between. I got involved with the center, but actually it was not a totally secure situation, like financially. Well, I could rely on Chantika, but I didn't want to do that forever either. So I realized that I've always followed my heart in a way of choosing what I wanted to do next. And there's a lot of going forth in that. Not going for the security and the safety of what is known in a way, or even financially. Those words of Sangha Rakshita really, still come to me a lot. So in a way, the last thing I want to say is that in a way, there is no need to live in a retreat center or a community to practice deeply. Yeah, we can think that I need to be a nun or a monk in a monastery, or I need to live in a community, in a retreat center, or in a community to really practice. Well, I know we don't need to necessarily do that. You know, just hearing Jodhida talk, was it last week? No, he hasn't lived in a community, and he's an immense practitioner. Yeah, he's raised a family. Millie is here. She's a product of that. And a friend of mine who lived in London with me in a community for a while. Actually, she had a baby in the community. There's another story. Yeah, communities, Buddhist communities can vary a lot. Yeah, we had a very wonderful community there, and she was part of that and had a baby. So she lived, but then she only lived there for some years. It was too difficult in a way, living with a child in a community, and she moved on her own. And she was always working and raising a child, and always felt that she couldn't be totally involved in the Sangha around the London Buddhist Center. But actually, she's amazing. Yeah, she's a real strong practitioner. So it's not, yeah, let's not fix, I would say, don't fix any situation as where you can't practice or can practice. I think the difference is that we need to know what conditions we need at times in our lives to practice. Like I wouldn't have been able to set up the Amsterdam Center. I wouldn't have been able to actually be in create a Sangha in Holland without my experience of London, without that, yeah, learning how to work with mental states, how to, you know, be surrounded by other Buddhist practitioners for in that way. But then I had a lot to go on to go back to Holland, yeah, and do and use that in a way. And also, I wouldn't, when I worked as a carer nurse, again, I was really bringing the Dharma into it. I mean, I was incognito, nobody knew, you know, me as Kumesiri particularly, but it's quite interesting, isn't it? Just suddenly you are, I was used to being Kumesiri in a Buddhist center by the whole Sangha, and then suddenly I wasn't, yeah. Again, but what is it? Just the way I worked, I felt a lot of Buddhist practices came into that just quite naturally. And I think, again, I could only bring, it felt really like a practice working. But again, I was really relying, being able to bring that in because of having had intense experiences of working together and, yeah, practicing together with Sangha. So what I'm saying is that if you can engage, like engaging, now I'm working in the Buddhist Center, again, Nottingham, isn't it, for quite some years. Working in a team with others is fantastic practice. It really is. And like our center is really open to all of you to join teams, you know, and get a bit of that sense of working together, yeah, bumping up to each other. Don't leave if it gets a bit difficult. Yeah, it's not about safety, it's not about security, it's not about comfort. It's about, yeah, getting to know each other deeply and yourself. It's about change. That ego needs bumping up against very much. Yeah, it needs drama. Or I would love to see a women's community as well, you know, arising in Nottingham. How wonderful would that be? Yeah, there's a lot we can actually set up. But again, there's also just giving yourself time to go on retreat. That was the last thing I will say. That also, while I was in Holland, I would go on retreats, long retreats, like a month solitary or 2-week retreats in England regularly. And that just helped sustain that sense of being with Sangha together, but that sense of deepening practice. And if you have a chance to like live in a community, go and be a guest in a community for 3 months or so, do, yeah? Or yeah, do that kind of thing in a retreat center, but it doesn't have to be forever. That's the thing, it doesn't have to be forever. Yeah. Okay, I think that's all I really want to say. That, yeah, Sangha, let's live in it. Let's make it, yeah, go beyond, go out, step over your private thresholds, you know, create friendships, really, really honest connections. Don't step back when there are difficulties. Step in there, allow change. And what a challenge, what fun, how inspiring. So that's me sharing a bit of my life.
Thank you, Kumesiri, so much. It's your passion for the Sangha jewel just shines bright. And I think here in Nottingham, we're extremely lucky to have you here helping us build our Sangha, and it's flourishing. And it's a good part of that is the experience and love and passion that you're bringing to that. And you're stepping out, always looking for where you can build Sangha. I love that. You're going forth sort of from that wonderful London situation, which brought back many memories for me, having been around the LBC for a bit. And then you just stepped into something so different. You don't look for the easy option. You don't settle down. You are very much right at the cutting edge of it. And so thank you for sharing that, and for the challenge that you bring to us as Sangha members to really step towards the Sangha, take the Sangha in more into our lives. So I think we're probably not got enough time to go into small groups now. But we've had 2 amazing speakers tonight. I wonder if there's anything that anybody else wants to ask either of